have, the traditions of the church, and their traditions that actually did begin before Yeshua's time, are to say a blessing prior to eating, which we did, right? Say a blessing prior to eating. That's the tradition. The command in Torah is when you have eaten and are satisfied, then you shall bless the Lord. So the command in Torah is to bless his name when we have eaten, when it's done. And there was put together a blessing after eating, and there's like several portions to it that is traditional. And yet, I don't want to do the whole book. So I'm going to go to the back page, which is the abridged version. And it says here, abridged for busy moms. And I want to say, and for others of us that don't have the attention span yet to do the whole thing. This is the abridged version. There is a much longer version that follows more the commandment to bless the Lord for all that he has provided, for the bread, for the return to Zion, for all of these things. And in the process of it, what we really want to recognize and understand is that we bless him, for he is good. Blessed is the compassionate one, our master, King of the universe, the master of the bread. Blessed is the compassionate one who nourishes us all. We thank you, O Lord our God, for the inheritance you've given to our fathers, the good, pleasant, and spacious land, the covenant, your word, bread for satisfaction. Blessed are you, Lord, for the land and for our nourishment. Have compassion, O Lord our God, upon us, upon Israel, your people, upon Jerusalem, your city, upon the kingdom of the house of David, your anointed one. And remember us for good on this day of Rosh Chodesh. Rebuild Jerusalem, the city of holiness, quickly in our days. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, who builds Jerusalem. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, the God who is our Father, our King, the good King, who does good to all, who did good to all. Who does good to all, then it says he did good, he does good, and he will do good for us. He was generous, he is generous, he will be generous forever, bestowing grace, devotion, compassion, and every good thing. May he allow us to see the days of Mashiach. May the one who makes peace in his heights make peace for us in his compassion, and for all of his people Israel. And we all say, Amen. Today is the blessing of the new month. Today is the new month, the first of months. And on this day, we want to recognize and celebrate the God who has put it all together, the God who has created it, the God who set the stars in space, the God who set the moon in its orbit. All of these things are about him. And we ask this blessing. Lord our God and God of our fathers, may this coming month be one of good and blessing. Grant us long life, a life of peace, of good, of blessing, sustenance, vigor, a life marked by reverence for you and a dread of sin, a life free from shame and reproach, a life of prosperity and honor, a life in which the love of your word and our reverence for you animate us, O Lord, a life in which our heartfelt desires are fulfilled for good. May he who performed miracles for our fathers and liberated them from slavery to freedom, may he quickly liberate us and gather the exiles from the four corners of the earth, even all of Israel, and let us say, Amen. May the Holy One, blessed be he, grant this to us and to all of his people, the house of Israel, for life, for peace, for gladness and joy, for deliverance and consolation. And let us say, Amen. Let's do Blessed Are You. This is the Barku prayer. And To the Holy One we sing. Lord of hosts is your name. Oh, ever-living God, rule over us, now and forever the same. Baruch et Adonai, Le'olam vaed. Baruch et Adonai, Le'olam vaed. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, eternity's holy King. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, whose word brings on the evening. But Father, as we gather here today, I ask that your blessing would be upon us, that we would honor you, that we would glorify your name, that in all that we do and say tonight, we would show and understand who you are, Lord. Let's do Shomer Israel. So we're not doing Hava Nagila? We'll do Shomer Israel. Shomer Israel, keeper of the flock of Israel. Shomer Israel, keeper of the flock of Israel. Goel Israel, redeemer of us all, redeemer, Prince of Peace, Sar Shalom. Goel Israel, redeemer of us all, redeemer, Prince of Peace, Sar Shalom. Shema Israel, Adonai Elohai. Shema Israel, Adonai El Shaddai. Zod Israel, Adon Yeshuati. Let us praise your holy name. We're going to do the Mighty One of Israel. The Lord shall cause his glorious voice to be heard. You shall have a song in the night. Come to the mountain of the Lord. See his glory and his might. He's the mighty one of Israel. He's the mighty one of Israel. His voice shall be heard in the power of his word. The mighty one of Israel. Shall be open and they'll see. The ears of the deaf shall hear. The lame man shall jump, shall leap as a hart. The tongue of the dumb shall sing. He's the mighty one of Israel. He's the mighty one of Israel. His voice shall be heard in the power of his word. The mighty one of Israel. The Lord shall cause his glorious beauty to be seen. The desert shall bloom and rejoice. Say to them who are fearful of heart, be strong, listen to his voice. He's the mighty one of Israel. He's the mighty one of Israel. His voice shall be heard in the power of his word. The mighty one of Israel. His mighty one. He's the mighty one of Israel. He's the mighty one of Israel. His voice shall be heard in the power of his word. The mighty one of Israel. The Lord shall cause his glorious voice to be heard. You shall have a song in the night. Come to the mountain of the Lord. See his glory and his might. He's the mighty one of Israel. He's the mighty one of Israel. And his voice shall be heard in the power of his word. The mighty one of Israel. Yes, he's the mighty one of Israel. He's the mighty one of Israel. His voice shall be heard in the power of his word. The mighty one of Israel.
Everybody should have to do that one. Let's do it one more time. Everybody up.
Everybody have that one?
Yeah.
Let's do taste and see. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. This is when we need to know for Pesach, so we might as well do it tonight.
This one's easy, Chris.
It's easy.
You're not getting any stockings until you start dancing.
Digest your food.
Oh,
Good for you.
I would have picked the first one.
No. Dance away the pounds class.
This is an easy one.
wow. Okay, no, go
This is
behind
this is one of the themes actually to the whole idea of the festivals, is that we get to taste and see that the Lord is good. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good to me. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good to me. You've turned my mourning into dancing, put off my rags, clothe me with gladness, and I will arise. I will praise you, I'll sing and not be silent. Oh Lord, my God, I will give thanks to you forever. Oh Lord, my God, I will give thanks to you. Oh Lord, my God, I will give thanks to you forever. Oh Lord, my God, I will give thanks to you. I will live only for you. I will lift these hands up to you. I will dance before you. I will shout it. I will shout it. Oh Lord, my God, I will give thanks to you forever. Oh Lord, my God, I will give thanks to you. Lord, my God, I will give thanks to you forever. Oh Lord, my God, I will give thanks to you. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good to me. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good to me. Dance is such a powerful form of worship.
But I couldn't sing and do it at the same time.
It is a powerful form of worship, and when we get to where we're doing it more and more and more, you get to where you kind of lose. One of the things about dance that it will do is it gets rid of your inhibitions a little bit, and we tend to hold back when it comes to worship. I'm not sure why. I mean, we can go to a football game and have our face half painted one color and half painted another. Nobody thinks a thing of it. But go to church and get excited and everybody thinks something's wrong with you. Right? So part of what the dance does is it gets us to let go of that idea that we have to sit still and be quiet. There is a time for reverence. There is a time for that. But with praise, hallelujah, means make a joyful noise. Be loud and clamorously foolish in declaring how wonderfully good God is. That's what hallelujah means. It's kind of a weird way to put it, but that is exactly what it means. I have some verses here for people to read. I don't know how many. So Craig, would you pass these around so that people can get ready to read as we learn about this new month? Thank y'all. Because this is a very special month.
We're drawing straws.
Drawing straws, take a couple. There's one or two that are going to be longer than others, but some of them are only one verse. There's one I think that's about 15 long.
Y'all like one?
Wow, it's 4 of them. Pretty good.
I guess so.
And I've been being asked lately about Bible versions that I read from and study from. And tonight I'm going to be working out of the Messianic Jewish Family Bible, the Tree of Life version. It's a nice, simple version. It's easy to understand. And it's a good translation. One of the things I really appreciate about it is that it is simple to read compared to the one that I do my study out of, which is already at home getting ready to go to Phoenix with me, which is the Complete Jewish Bible. David Stern did a phenomenal job putting together the Complete Jewish Bible. It's not a direct translation necessarily, but the thing about it, did you get a verse, Janie? The thing about the Complete Jewish Bible is he puts in the Hebrew. He puts the Hebrew names to it. He puts in all. Now this version does have the Torah portions broken down, and it tells you where it stops and where it starts, but it does not do what the Complete Jewish Bible does, which is give you the daily readings. In the Complete Jewish Bible, it even breaks it down to how much to read a day, so that you can read a little bit on Sunday, first day of the week, a little bit on Monday, a little bit on Tuesday, so by the end of the week you've read all of it and not felt totally overwhelmed. Because sometimes I look at these Torah portions and it's like, that's a lot of reading, right? It's not if you break it down into little chunks. But anyway, I'll be reading out of the Messianic, the Tree of Life version today, just because it's the one that's here. The other one is getting packed to go to Arizona with me. I think I've got two things packed, and my Bible is one of them. I have to finish packing tonight. This is the month of spring, despite what the weather looks like outside. This is springtime in Klamath, guys. It is what it is, right? The daffodils come up. What was that? I wrote a poem couple of years after being here a couple of years, and the first year here I saw the daffodils come up, and I thought they were so beautiful, and it snowed, and I thought, wow, that's cool. Picture daffodils in the snow, right? You know, I thought it was unique, and the next year it was daffodils, and then the snow came, and the next year, and it's like, oh, this isn't so unusual, is it? You know? But it is pretty, and then I sat down one, and it was it was actually Resurrection Sunday, an Easter morning, that I looked out and I saw the snow coming down, and it was covering the daffodils in my front yard. And I thought, must be spring in Klamath. Just must be what it is, right? But this is a month of spring. It is the month of redemption. It is the month of deliverance. It is the month of Pesach, Passover. The name of the month is Nisan or Aviv, depending on where you're reading it from. Before the Babylonian exile, it was called Aviv. After the Babylonian exile, it became known by the name of Nisan. Okay, now lest we think horrible things about the Babylonian words that were brought over, it's actually thought that the word Nisan comes from either the word Nitzan, which means bud, like a budding plant, which makes perfect sense, right? Or Nisam, which means miracles, and we're all familiar with the word Nes, right? Gadol Nes, because of the miracle of Hanukkah, a great miracle that happened there. The word Nisan actually comes from either to bud or to have miracles, the miraculous rebirth. Prior to Babylon, like I said, it was called Aviv, which comes from two words, Av, and then the Yod Bet at the end of it, Yod Bet, which actually is the number 12. How many of you remember what the word Av means in Hebrew? Huh? Father. So Aviv is the father of the 12. What are the 12? The months, right? Aviv is the father of the 12. Yeah. It is the father of the 12 months. This is the new year for counting months. There are 4 new years in Judaism. There's the new year of the trees, and it's when we start the counting of the birthday of all trees. So all trees are dated by that day. Then there is Aviv, which is the first of the months. It's for counting the months. So the trees, it's for counting the trees. Aviv, it's for counting the months. Then there's another one in the summertime, corresponding to our August usually, and it's the new year for the cattle. It's from that day on where cattle are counted for tithes, because it's about the tithes and offerings. And then there's the new year of the years, where the years are counted, and that is Rosh Hashanah. So there's 4 new years in Judaism, and they're all about the counting of the trees. Yes?
So this one's like our January.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
Only the year doesn't change. So it's more like the starting of the school year.
Huh. Okay.
You know?
I was just trying to put it into our.
Yeah, it is. It's fun, isn't it? Because there's the year that we start the trees, counting the trees for the fruit, but this would be, I think it's more along the lines of like the starting of school. You know, grade school and high, all that stuff begins in September, and you have a year, right? And you go in, and this is the counting of the months. Tishri, which is Rosh Hashanah, is the legal year. It's the counting of linear time by year. Linear time meaning there's a beginning, there's an ending. It's counted from the day the earth was created. It will be counted until the earth is destroyed. Aviv, Nisan, is the counting of the months, and it's actually more of a counting of a circular time. Infinite. You know, our redemption is infinite. Yes, there's a beginning, but there will be no end to our redemption. There's no end to our salvation. And this is the liturgical year, or the year of the cycles of the festivals. And this is the month that begins. Does that make total mud sense to you guys? It's taken me a while to get where I even halfway understand it. So don't expect to get it all right away. But Tishri is the linear time. Aviv is the circular time. Nisan is the cycles that God has put in place. And those cycles are our cycles of redemption. They're pictures of redemption. All of it is. Who has Exodus 12, verses 1 and 2? Stand and read if you can. We have several people in Exodus, but 12 and in Exodus 12. Exodus 12, 1 and 2.
Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be your beginning of months, and it shall be the first month of the year to you.
The first month of the year to you, the liturgical year. There are people who want to argue this right now, in particularly the Hebrew roots movement, want to argue with Judaism and say, well, we shouldn't have Rosh Hashanah then because this is the beginning of months according to this. This is the beginning of the year. This is the beginning of the months, not the numbered years. So it's kind of it's a concept that not everybody gets, and it's okay. In this month, there are 3 festivals, and they're all combined together, so that most of the time we only think about the one, the festival of Passover or Pesach. But we not only have the festival of Passover, Pesach, but we also have the festival of unleavened bread and the festival of first fruits, the first fruit of the barley harvest. That's 3 distinct festivals that all happen within a 1-week period of time. They're all laid out for us. Someone has 15 verses to read. Leviticus 23, 1 through 15.
Then Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Bnei Israel and tell them, These are the appointed Moedim of Adonai, which you are to proclaim to be holy convocations, my Moedim. Work may be done for 6 days, but the 7th day is Shabbat, of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You are to do no work. It is a Shabbat to Adonai in all your dwellings. These are the appointed feasts of Adonai, holy convocations, which you are to proclaim in their appointed season. This month, in the evening, is Adonai's Passover. On the 15th day of the same month is the feast of Matzah to Adonai. For 7 days you are to eat matzah. On the first day you are to have a holy convocation, and you shall do no regular work. Instead you are to present an offering made by fire to Adonai for 7 days. On the 7th day is a holy convocation, when you are to do no regular work. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Bnei Israel and tell them, when you have come into the land which I give to you, and reap its harvest, then you are to bring the omer of the first fruits of your harvest to the Kohen. He is to wave the omer before Adonai to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Shabbat, the Kohen is to wave it. On the day when you wave the omer, you are to offer a male lamb without blemish, 1 year old, as a burnt offering to Adonai. The grain offering with it shall be 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil, an offering made by fire to Adonai for a soothing aroma. Its drink offering with it shall be 1/4 of a gallon of wine. You are not to eat bread, roasted grain, or fresh grain until this same day, until you have brought the offering of your God. It is a statute forever throughout your generations in all your dwellings. Then you are to count from the morrow after the Shabbat, from the day that you brought the omer of the wave offering, 7 complete Shabbatot.
That's out of the Tree of Life version.
That's
It's-
my new
it's-
Bible.
It's understandable, isn't it? You get it. You don't understand what a hin of wine is and a hin of it. We don't get that. But reading it out of this version, I was like, oh, well, I know how to measure that. You know? I know how much wine needs to get poured out. You don't get to drink it.
1/4 of the gallon.
1/4 of the gallon gets poured out, right? Okay. Now, that's 3 different festivals that are described from verse 4 on. Before that, it's just telling you that these are to be my festivals. Interesting to me that it says that these are to be forever in all generations, in all dwellings. So it's not just to be done when you live in Jerusalem or Israel. It's everywhere you live. You are to celebrate these days. You are to commemorate these days. The first one, of course, is Passover, right? So we're going to look at that one first. And we think of it as being the Feast of Unleavened Bread, but guess what? That's the next one. The first one is Passover itself, Pesach. And the steps are kind of clear into how you're supposed to do it. We're going to look at Exodus 12, verses 3 through 6. So there's 2 places to keep your fingers, and one is in Exodus and the other is in Leviticus.
Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th of this month, every man shall take for himself a lamb, according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the person. According to each man's need, you shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. You may take it from the sheep or from the goats. Now you should keep it until the 14th day of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it at twilight.
The steps are pretty clear. On the 10th day of the month, you pick a lamb. Whether it's from the goats or from the sheep, doesn't matter. You pick a lamb. Should be a certain age. All of that stuff is specified. You bring it into your house. So it's not kept outside. It's brought into the house. And you're going to dwell with it for a couple of days as a family. And then on the 14th, at sunset, you slaughter the lamb. Can you imagine you've just spent a couple of days with it in your house even? You notice it's also that if there aren't enough people in your family to eat the whole thing in one night, you get 2 families together. Okay? The thing with this, these are instructions for the very first time that they're to do this. Remember that, because I actually have had people say, oh, well, we did Passover once, we did, and then they talked about this, and I went, oh, so you tried to recreate the original deliverance? We're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to remember it, commemorate it. not recreate it. Yeshua was not sacrificed twice, right?
Mhm.
Neither is this deliverance done twice. It's one time. The first time, how we're supposed to do it. Who has Exodus 12 verses 7 through 13? These are the specific instructions for that first time.
They are to take the blood and put it on the two doorposts on the crossbeam of the houses where they will eat it. They are to eat the meat that night, roasted over a fire, with matzot and bitter herbs. They are to eat it. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled with water, but only roasted with fire. Its head with its legs and its innards. So let nothing of it remain until the morning. Whatever remains until the morning you are to burn with fire. Also, you are to eat it this way, with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand. You are to eat it in haste. It is Adonai's Passover. For I will go through the land of Egypt on that night and strike down every firstborn, both men and animals, and I will execute judgments against all of the gods of Egypt. I am Adonai. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. So there will be no plague among you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt.
There are some things that we do differently today in the celebration of this meal, in the celebration of this festival, than they did that first time. Specific things that we do different. First of all, we don't slaughter the lamb and put the blood on the doorposts of our houses. We don't do that. We don't eat it standing up with our loins girded. In fact, you're supposed to recline at the table. Rest at the table. Why? Because slaves have to eat in a hurry standing up. Tell that to every mother that eats in the kitchen, right? Slaves they can't just sit and relax. Once we are free from Egypt, we can sit and relax. So unlike the first night where they were to eat it standing and ready to run, now when we celebrate it relaxed because we don't have to run now. We are free. That's part of the celebration. We typically don't have lamb for ours. I know that there are some that do, and that's actually something that's just in the last, historically, it's not lamb since the destruction of the temple. This last couple generations, they've started having lamb at some households to remember the lamb, but usually there's a shank bone of a lamb on the plate to represent the sacrifice. But because we don't do a sacrifice now, there's no temple to do it in, and we don't want anyone assuming that we would do a sacrifice, we don't have lamb for Passover. That was done once. That's done when we're in Israel and the temple is standing. Then a lamb is done. And we don't have to burn all the leftovers. We actually get to take them home and eat them. We don't have to burn it. We don't have to eat it all in one night. We don't have to eat in a hurry. In fact, Passover meal tends to be kind of long and drawn out. And you get where you're hungry before you get to eat sometimes. So it's not done in haste. It's not done standing up. We don't have to gorge ourselves and we don't have to burn the leftovers. We're not making it as a sacrifice at the tabernacle or the temple today. So we don't do it exactly that way, but that is the way they were commanded to do it the first night in Egypt as God was getting ready to deliver them. In verse 14, he starts to tell us how we're supposed to do it in future generations. Someone has verses 14 through 20 of Exodus 12.
Now this day will be a memorial to you, and you shall celebrate it as a feast to the Lord. Throughout your generations you are to celebrate it as a permanent ordinance. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread, but on the first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats anything leavened from the first day unto the seventh day that person shall be cut off from Israel. On the first day you shall have a holy assembly, another holy assembly on the seventh day. No work at all shall be done on them, except what must be eaten by every person that is alone may be prepared by you. You shall also observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this very day I brought your hosts out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as a permanent ordinance. In the first month of the 14th day of the month at evening you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month of the evening. 7 days shall be no leaven found in your homes, in your houses. For whoever eats what is leavened, that person shall be cut off from all the congregation of Israel, whether he is an alien or a native of the land. You shall not eat anything leavened in all your dwellings. You shall eat unleavened bread.
How many times did it say this is a lasting generation, a lasting ordinance? How many times did it say you're supposed to always do this? How many times did it say wherever you live? My question is, why is the church not doing it? I think because we don't understand it. We think this was just for them. But it says, whether they're an outsider or one who was born in the land, whether you are Jewish or not, if you dwell amongst the people of faith, you're to keep this festival. The Apostle Paul writes that we have been grafted in with the people of Israel. If we're grafted in, then we should be honoring this. My position, I'll stand on it, I'll preach it forever, right? It's a lasting ordinance. It's also repeated several times that there is to be no leaven in your house. On the first day, remove all of the leaven, and we reenact this during our Passover meal, where we actually get the wooden spoon and the feather, and it's become a cute little tradition that is done, that to help people remember. But I'll be honest with you, the taking the leaven out of the house is already beginning in most homes. On the first day of this month, that's when it begins. Some even begin sooner, depending on how big the house is, because you have to sweep every nook and cranny. Every closet gets cleaned out. Every drawer gets opened up. Every piece of furniture gets vacuumed out thoroughly. Rugs get taken outside and beaten to make sure there's no breadcrumbs. Wow. We had a neighbor that I used to watch her. She would bring the furniture out, and I'm like, my mom would say, oh, she's just doing spring cleaning. I know better now, because we never did that kind of spring cleaning. We never took our couches outside and took the cushions and beat them. We vacuumed them, yes, but we didn't do all that. Literally every piece of furniture in their home during this couple weeks preceding Passover would be brought out to the front, to the sidewalk, swept off, and anything that came off of it went out into the street. Why? Because they're removing leaven from their home and their property. No chance of a breadcrumb in her home. It wasn't going to happen. She was not going to let it happen. Her husband laughed at her. He was Reformed. She was Orthodox. He thought she went to way too much work. But she was being honoring of the commandment, no leaven, no matter where you live. It repeats also that for 7 days there's to be no leaven, right? From the evening of the 14th to the evening of the 21st, it tells us specifically even the dates. Did you catch that? God doesn't want us to mess this up. He wants us to understand it. There's a sacred assembly on the first day, and no work is to be done on that day. That makes it a Sabbath. That's what a Sabbath is. The sacred assembly, no work. That's a Sabbath, a type of Sabbath. And it says, and there's also one at the end, the last day. The last day? Do you know anybody that celebrates the Sabbath on the last day? That has dropped out of favor. It hasn't been done for generations. But there are some. There are some that have been doing it. In fact, it's not something that's even understood. There's not a lot of tradition around it in traditional Judaism. It's not talked about in the Mishnah and the Talmud, like Pesach itself is. But some have begun bringing it back. Some are doing it. There's a record of a Russian rabbi who in the 1800s instituted a Messiah meal. That the last day, that assembly is about Mashiach that is coming. We have the redemption that Moses brought us and that we celebrate on the first day, but we have a redemption coming by Mashiach. We're going to celebrate that on the last day. And they do a thing, and it's called the Meal of Messiah. On the 14th is Passover. On the evening of the 14th is when the lamb is slain. Evening being 3 o'clock in the afternoon on. They count their time a little different than we do. And then we have 7 days of unleavened bread. It has Leviticus 23 verses 4 through 8.
These are the appointed times of the Lord, holy convocations, which are shall proclaimed at the times appointed for them. In the first month of the 14th day of the month of the twilight in the Lord's Passover. On the 15th day of the same month there is a feast of unleavened bread to the Lord. For 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall not do any laborious work. But for 7 days you shall present an offering by fire to the Lord, and on the 7th day is a holy convocation. You shall not do any laborious work.
Do you think it's important that it's repeated again? There's other places it's repeated too. I'm not going to go to them because I think we've got the idea of it, right? Passover, the end of the 14th day. So the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is the Feast of Matzah, then begins. That's the 7-day festival. Passover is 1 day. Unleavened bread is 7 days. But in the middle of it all, there is another one, and it's called First Fruits, or Habikarim in Hebrew. And this one is one that it does say when you are in the land. Leviticus 23, 9 through 14. Who has that? Go ahead and stand and read it if you have that one. Leviticus 23, verses 9 through 14. Okay.
Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, and say to them, When you enter the land which I am going to give to you, and reap its harvest, then you shall bring in the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. He shall wave the sheaf before the Lord for you to be accepted. On the day after Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. Now on the day when you wave the sheaf, you shall offer a male lamb 1 year old without defect for a burnt offering to the Lord. Its grain offering shall then be 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil, an offering by fire to the Lord, for a soothing aroma with its drink offering, and a fourth of a hin of wine. Until this same day, until you have brought in the offering of your God, you shall eat neither bread, nor roasted grain, nor new growth. It is to be a perpetual statute throughout your generation in all your dwelling places.
So this is the first fruits of grain. The first grain, that which bread is made from. What did we just get rid of a bunch of for 7 days? Bread, right? Any kind of bread, anything that has chametz in it. Chametz being yeast, which is, by the way, a natural producing thing. If you take a grain, any kind of grain, and you mix it with water and you let it sit, you will have yeast. It will develop. It's something that actually floats around in the air. I mean, it's automatic. That's how come it's very specific for Passover, that there's matzah for Passover and there's matzah that's not for Passover. It's flat bread. It looks like it's unleavened, but there's no guarantee that there's absolutely no leavening in it, because if you mixed the grain with the water and you let it sit for more than 14 minutes, I think it's 14. Huh? It's less than 20, I know that. Anyway, there's a specific number that they've come up with scientifically that when the yeast begins to actually divide and grow, before that time, as long as it's baked before that time, it's okay for Passover. If it's baked after that time, it's not okay. But again, it's talking about the grain now, that which you make bread out of. The first harvest in the land, the earliest thing that produces grain is the barley. It says that we're to do it on the day after the Sabbath. Which Sabbath? Because, you know, what did I say? The first day of unleavened bread is a Sabbath, right? Because you don't work. The last day of unleavened bread is a Sabbath, because you're not supposed to work. But then there's also the weekly Sabbath, that you're not supposed to work. So that depending on what day the festival begins, you can have 3 Sabbaths in that festival. Which Sabbath? They argue about it. It's been argued about. It was being argued about at the time of Yeshua as to which Sabbath. There was a huge disagreement between 2 particular groups that we know of for sure. And there was actually a third group, the Essenes, that I'm not sure where they stood on, but I do know that the Sadducees were adamant that it was the day after the weekly Sabbath that this would take place. That would be the Sadducees, their position. The Pharisees said it was the day after unleavened bread, because that first day of unleavened bread is a Sabbath. And so that's the day they chose, that they say it is. Now, it's interesting because the high priest was a Sadducee, but the Levites that oversaw the temple and all of the work that goes on with the temple were pretty much Pharisees. So within the temple, you had this clash of what is the right day. So they kind of did it on both days. At the time of Yeshua, they were doing it on both days. The question is, what difference does it really make? Well, I think it makes a difference in this perspective. The festivals are all rehearsals. In fact, that one of the words that's translated festival is mikra, which means a rehearsal, like the rehearsing a play. And they're all rehearsals of the pictures of our Mashiach. They're rehearsals of our deliverance. That's the story of salvation from the first festival to the last. And we're looking at these as a picture of our Messiah and what he does for us. We've got Passover. That's the day he was crucified. He was the Passover lamb whose blood covers the doorposts of our hearts and our lives. Unleavened bread, that refers to the getting rid of sin, and it refers to the burial, actually. And then the first fruits. What's so cool about first fruits? Paul refers to the first fruits as resurrection and the day of resurrection. Today's Jewish calendar typically follows the Pharisees' tradition, and that was set up, by the way, by the last Sanhedrin. And honestly, until Yeshua comes and sets things straight, we follow that tradition. Why? Because God told us to follow authority. And he set authority in place within Israel. And that authority was the Sanhedrin. Whether we like it or not, that was the authority. And, by the way, Yeshua never corrected them on any of it. He never told them they were doing it on the wrong day. So if he didn't, why should we? They are the authority. It is now done, the Habicharim, the first fruits, we would have Passover. The 14th is the day the lamb is sacrificed. That evening, you eat the meal. Now, the evening of the 14th is what day? What does the day begin? When does the day begin? Sunset, right? So the evening of the 14th, as it goes away, becomes the 15th. That is actually the first day of unleavened bread. That's your 7 days. The next day would be considered the day after the Sabbath, because the day of unleavened bread, the 15th, is a Sabbath day. It is a high Sabbath. So they consider the next day to be the morning after the Sabbath, and that morning, the morning of the 16th, they would bring a handful of the barley to the temple. You cannot eat bread from the new grain until after this has been done, when you're living in the land and the temple stands. First day of first fruits. Now you can have new bread. Of course, for the first few days of it, there's no leaven in the bread, right? You've gotten rid of the leaven. There's no leavening in the house. Any bread you make after this has to come from a fresh start. You cannot have bread that's been sitting around. No sourdough that's been growing. None of it. It all has to be new. You have to make your new starter for that year.
My 100-year sourdough won't work.
Huh?
My 100-year sourdough, I can't keep it.
Sorry. Wait till at least a week after you unleavened bread.
Well, you can tell it to somebody.
Again, this is a picture. This is a picture. Okay? When we get rid of the leaven representing pride, by the way, it doesn't just represent sin, it represents pride. Pride leads to sin. It's natural, it happens. It's not necessarily just sin. It's that pride that we have that leads us into sin. Once that is gone, once we have died to self, then we are resurrected into a new life, and we are never to go back to the old life. Do you see how it's a perfect picture of salvation? You can't go back to the old. You have to have the new. Have to have the new. If we see Passover as a picture of our salvation, with Yeshua being the Lamb, then the days of unleavened bread become days of purification or sanctification, where we are putting the self to death with Christ. By the way, historically, it took the Israelites a week. From the night they sacrificed the Passover lamb, put the blood on the door, they were chased out in the morning. Took them 7 days to get to the Red Sea. They crossed the Red Sea, going through the water, right? And Paul refers to that as their baptism into Moses. They crossed the Red Sea. When they crossed the Red Sea, they are no longer slaves to Egypt. They are now free under the leadership of Moses. Just like when we cross over into our salvation, we are now free from sin, but we're saved under Yeshua. We now follow him. Walking in new life, new grain. The old is done away with. The old is done away with. Now that first day of the waving of the grain in the temple, that's the beginning of the counting of the omer. And in fact, an omer is a measurement of grain. That's all it is. I always had this weird idea, what would be an omer? Well, an omer is a measurement. It's like a handful of grain. So they might as well just say grab a handful of grain and wave it, right? It's a specific size of a handful. Kind of like, when you measure the spaghetti in the pot, right? There's actually measurements that you're supposed to use to determine how much for who, how many people, right? And double it at our house. But the omer is a specific measurement of the grain, and it's waved. And this begins the count now to Pentecost, to Shavuot. And Passover is not considered complete until Pentecost. It's not considered complete. That whole time that you're counting the grain every single day for 50 days is all a continuation of the celebration of the Passover lamb, the celebration of unleavened bread. So the 14th is Pesach. From the 15th to the 21st is unleavened bread. Habikarim, first fruits, is in the midst of it, and the count to Pentecost comes. Paul said that Yeshua is our first fruits of many. The barley harvest, by the way, in Scripture represents the Jewish people. When Yeshua was resurrected, there were others resurrected also. If you read the last chapter of the book of Luke, you will find out, you will see that. He wasn't the only one, but he was the first. Resurrected. The beginning of the first day following the weekly Sabbath. I had a discussion with someone just this morning about when that was. We don't know for sure. There are some teachers that think it happened immediately at sunset. I don't know. It could have. His resurrection could have been that early. What we do know is that the women went to the tomb while it was still dark, before the sun had raised, and they found the tomb rolled away, the stone rolled away, and the tomb was empty. And then Mary meets him in the garden, right? And he says, don't touch me yet, I'm not yet ascended, and we don't understand that, but did you know there's a waving of the Omer in the morning after sunrise? I think, personally, that Yeshua was saying, it's not done yet, hold on, just a little bit more. And when that Omer was waved by the priests in the temple, I believe Yeshua was waving before God, the Father. Here I am. It's done. It's done. The sages say that in Nisan, or in Aviv, we are redeemed from Egypt. And in Nisan, we will be redeemed for eternity. That's written in the Talmud. If we see Yeshua as Messiah, we know that has been fulfilled. The day is coming, though, when his people will look on the one they've pierced. They'll recognize the Lamb slain before time. Until then, they look, and they still look for Mashiach. And they cry for Mashiach. And a couple of years ago, there was a prayer that was declared and asked to be prayed every day at a specific time. Mashiach, come now. Mashiach, come now. They don't even realize who they're asking to come. Mm-hmm. They're looking for Yeshua, but they don't see him. It's interesting because this month, the tribe that is honored and recognized, as every month has a tribe, is the tribe of Judah, Yehuda. It is the first month. He is the first son. He is not the firstborn, but he was given the position of leadership, the position of the firstborn, because his older brothers Simeon and Levi both violated that position. So Judah, Yehuda, is the first. That's Genesis 29:35.
And she conceived again and bore a son and said, this time I will praise the Lord. Therefore she named him Judah. Then she stopped bearing.
Now he's the third son. Yehuda, Judah. It means praise, to give thanks, to speak joyfully. And Judah is seen as the tribe of praise. Judah is seen as the tribe of the leadership. But they're the praisers. Genesis 49:8-12. Jacob's blessing over his son.
Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the rock, on the neck of your enemies. Your father's son shall bow down to you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He couches, he lies down as a lion, and as a lion, who dares rouse him up? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, not the ruler's staff from between the feet, until Shiloh comes, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. He ties his foal to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. He washes his garments in wine, and his robes in the blood of grapes. 14. Okay, His eyes are dull from wine, and his teeth white from milk.
Now that's the longest blessing we have from Jacob to his sons, to Judah. It's from this blessing that Jacob speaks over his sons that we understand that Judah is to rule and reign. It is their role to be the kings over Israel. The kingly reign is established all the way back here. Israel's king was to come from Judah. Did you see the reference to the donkey and to the colt? Do you remember when Yeshua rode into Jerusalem, he had them bring him a colt that had been unbroken? In other words, nobody had ever ridden on that donkey before. You know why? It fulfills this passage. It shows the people, when he comes in on the donkey's colt, it shows them he is the fulfillment of the king for the tribe of Judah. anytime you want to look at a really fun private study, look at the cults, look at the donkeys, and see who it refers to, who's mentioned, because you will see a picture of Messiah when you study that, when you look at that. Every one of them. Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a colt. Why would you use a donkey for the king? Don't most nations have the king come in on a big horse? A war horse, right? Not Israel's king. Israel's king came in riding a donkey.
Must have been a Democrat.
He rode on the donkey to keep him humble, to remind him that he is one of the people too. Humility is an important aspect of rulership and leadership. Moshe's blessing, Deuteronomy 33:7. Deuteronomy 33:7. So, you have that one?
I got it, but then Now this is for Judah, he said. Hear Adonai, the voice of Judah. Bring him to his people. His hands contended for him, so you will be a help against his foes.
The study of this verse has all kinds of interesting twists and turns on it. Hear, Lord, the voice of Judah and bring him to his people. Wait a minute, isn't Judah the king? So why does he need to be brought to his people? Right? Judah's crying out for that. And it says his hands defend him. Think about it this way. Yeshua, who is the king, has been separated from his people for a couple thousand years now. And the prophet says in Zechariah 12, verse 10, they will look on the one whom they have pierced. They will recognize him. Psalm 22:16, it says, they pierced my hands and my feet. His hands were pierced. His hands. Who has John 20, verses 24 through 28? The Gospel of John.
Now Thomas, called the twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. The other disciples therefore said to him, we have seen the Lord. So he said to them, unless I see in his hands the print of the nails, and put my finger into the print of the nails, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. How far am I going? 28.
Verse 28.
And after 8 days his disciples were again inside, and Thomas with them. Jesus came, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst, and said, peace be to you. Then he said to Thomas, reach your finger here, and look at my hands, and reach your hand here, and put it in my side. Do not be unbelieving, but be believing. And Thomas answered and said to him, my Lord and my God.
With his hands he defended himself, did he not? Mm-hmm. With his hands. He defends his cause. Yet now he's not with his people. He's not done. It's not all over with. Yes, we only have those 3 festivals in this month. But guess what? There's another festival coming. There's more coming. It's not all done. This month is about the Lamb. The Lamb of God. But the Lamb is also from the tribe of Judah. And Judah is the lion. The lion. That's Revelation 5, 1 through 10.
I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a book written inside and on the back, sealed up with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the book and break its seals?" And no one in heaven or on the earth or under the earth was able to open the book or to look into it. Then I began to weep greatly, because no one was found worthy to open the book or look into it. And one of the elders said to me, "Stop weeping. Behold, the Lion that is from the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has overcome so as to open the book and its 7 seals." And I saw between the throne with the 4 living creatures, the elders, a lamb standing as if slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God, set out into all the earth. And he came and took the book out of the right hand of him who sat on the throne. When he had taken the book, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each one holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, "Worthy are you to take the book and to break its seals, for you were slain and purchased for God with your blood men from every tribe and tongue and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom and priests to our God, and they will reign upon the earth."
This month, the month of Nisan, is the month of our deliverance. And in this month, we see the lamb in the festivals and in the crucifixion. But we also see the lion in the tribe that is honored. This month is the month when the lion became the lamb. The king of eternity becomes the lamb. But he's not done yet. He's not come as the lion yet. This is the beginning of the months. The day of the king is not yet here. That's Rosh Hashanah. As we begin the count, we watch for the fulfillment. We remember that the lamb of this month becomes the lion, the king. Revelation 19:11-16.
Now I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. And he who sat on him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes were like a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns. He had a name written that no one knew except himself. He was clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. And the armies in heaven, clothed in fine linen, white and clean, followed him on white horses. Now out of his mouth goes a sharp sword, that with it he should strike the nations, and he himself will rule them with a rod of iron. He himself treads the winepress of the fierceness of the wrath of Almighty God, and he has on his robe and on his thigh a name written.
And his name is King of Kings and Lord of Lords. We look to the Lamb, but we recognize that he is also the Lion. We're going to do the Lion of Judah, the song. Because this song acknowledges both. Someone put it under "You're the Lion of Judah" instead of "Lion of Judah." Yep. The full name, right? You're the Lion of Judah, the Lamb who was slain. You ascended to heaven and evermore will reign. At the end of the age, when the earth you reclaim, you will gather the nations before you, and the eyes of all men will be fixed on the Lamb who was crucified. Well, maybe we'll do it at Passover again. I don't know. As the evening comes to a close, I think we can probably say that there's at least 3 stars visible in the sky out there, right?
No.
When the sky is dark and 3 stars can be seen in a single glance, which is usually about 42 minutes after sunset, and technically it was a little bit ago, then we can do, that's when the evening prayer is said, followed by the Havdalah on Shabbat. The Havdalah, means separation. Sabbath is separated as a special day to the Lord, and at the end of that day, we end the separation and we enter the regular week again. The blessing, Baruch Hamavdil ben Kodesh L'cho, blessed is he who differentiates between the sacred and the non-sacred. We recite Havdalah holding a cup of wine. Now, I have some grape juice here. And we're not going to pour all of the grape juice yet. Because the first one, the one that sits here, is poured to the point. Like our joy, our Sabbath day, we would like to run over and continue into the week. And then we get to have some fun. We get to have a little fun. And this is a fun song and a fun little dance, and I expect you all to participate. The words are very easy to the beginning of it. It goes like this. Lie, 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 lie. Do it again. Lie, 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 lie. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen Amen. Lie, 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 lie. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei v'samim. Amen. It smells good. We're going to pass it around here. I'll smell. Lie, 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 just as Shabbat is sanctified with wine, so too is her departure sanctified. The wine is what lifts our spirits from the letdown that we're going to feel when Sabbath is over and we have to go back to work. You know? The spices, it's a sweet fragrance to refresh our spirits, to dispel sadness over the departure of Shabbat. A pleasant fragrance not only affects the physical senses, it invigorates the mind and the spirit. The scent has a clear effect on our moods. A clear effect. The smell is interpreted by an area of the brain that is concerned with our emotions. Did you know that? So good positive smell helps us with good positive attitude. Recognizing also that as we have celebrated Shabbat, as we take in the breath of God, we want to be able to carry that with us throughout the week. Lie, 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 lie. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei morei ha'ash Amen. Shabbat is ushered in with fire and it's ushered out with fire. We light the Sabbath candles to begin Shabbat. We light the Havdalah candle as it's ending. The Havdalah candle is a candle that is woven together, at least 3, just as we are woven together before God. Fire can be used for good things or for bad things. We have the capacity to do good or to do evil. Just like the week that is in our hands that is coming up is when we can do good or we can do evil. And of course we want to do good, right? Right. We look at the reflection of the flame in our fingernails to reflect the light and the sensitivities that we've learned in Sabbath. And then we look at the light and the shadow to see the distinction that is made. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu. Oh, that's the wrong one. Baruch atah Adonai Hamdel Ben Kodesh Lachol. Baruch atah Adonai Hamdel Ben Kodesh Lachol. Amen. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who makes a distinction between the sacred and the non-sacred, between light and darkness, between Israel and the other nations, between the 7th day and the 6 working days. Blessed are you, Lord our God, who makes a distinction between the sacred and the non-sacred. I'm going to pour some cups here, and you're welcome to come and get a cup to drink with me as we conclude Shabbat. I don't know how many people there are, or maybe someone can pass them around. I don't know. Jamie, I'll do a special one just for you. How's that? Okay. How many people are so I'm just It's just grape juice. Oops, sorry. I need more rain. Who still needs those 2 more?
Stacy, I like can.
Okay.
Craig
I'll
needs
wait.
2. So then Craig needs 1. And then Bob. We're told that when the disciples got together after the resurrection and they met together, it said that they would go to the temple together and that they broke bread together regularly. The breaking bread is a symbol and a sign of the keeping of the Shabbat, the bread that is the bread that is pulled apart. We know that the early believers would do the synagogue. They would go to the synagogue, then they would go to each other's homes. They would have meals together, and they would worship God, and they would celebrate Havdalah together. And as soon as Havdalah is celebrated, it becomes the first day of the week. So when it says that Paul was teaching the first day of the week, and he taught all night, and the guy fell out of the window and died, he started teaching at sunset right after the Havdalah candle went out. He taught all night. The boy fell from the window, died, was resurrected. We know it was that way because Paul had to be on a boat in the morning. So he'd been teaching all night. This was what they did together. And Yeshua said, when you drink of the cup, remember me. See, this cup, is as much as it represents the joy of Shabbat, also represents our Mashiach, our Messiah, the one who died for us. And let's drink it in remembrance of him. And when Sabbath is done, the flame is extinguished in the wine. But don't let your light be extinguished. Carry it off into the week. Remember Yeshua, our Lamb, sacrificed, who is the coming King. honor him this week. And then join us again next week for Shabbat. Right? Father, thank you for this time. Thank you for this evening. I ask that we will have learned, not just learned in our head, though. Because, Father, it's not enough just to learn knowledge. Your heart is that we would learn to do, to honor you, to obey you, to seek to understand so that we can obey. Lord, give us wisdom. Let us grow in you. Let us be changed from glory to glory as your people following you. In the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, our Lord and our Savior, may we speak and seek to have not just a good week this time, but a good month as well. Shofars. It's time to declare the month. I have a new one, but I don't know that I want to blow it. This one fits in my suitcase. I'm going to Arizona, and my sister made a joke about, you need to bring your shofar. Dad always liked you blowing to the shofar, so I'm going to blow a shofar at the grave. This should be fun, right?
No, it's good practice.
Huh?
Good practice.
Good practice, but I couldn't fit one in my suitcase, so I had to go get a new one. You know, because it has to fit in a carry-on, so this is a short one. Should I try this one tonight?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody want to use another one? Let's the three of us blow. And then anyone that wants to try to blow can, right? We'll blow all together first. Oh, the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'shmoach kol shofar. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who sanctifies us with your commandments and has commanded us to hear the voice of the shofar. So I'll blow together.